West Virginia, the 35th star on the American flag, is far more than just a small state nestled within the Appalachian Mountains. Bordered by Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, Kentucky, and Ohio, its rugged terrain and shadowy valleys have hidden secrets for thousands of years. But beyond the modern capital of Charleston lies a land haunted by a forgotten past. Long before statehood in 1863, West Virginia was a silent witness to ancient footsteps. Nearly 14,000 years ago, the first known hunters stalked mammoths across the Ohio and Kanawha valleys. These early wanderers paved the way for the archaic people, who thrived by fishing, hunting small game, and foraging in the dense forests. Then came the Adena, often called the Mound Builders. From around 500 BC to 100 AD, they left behind massive earthen monuments, mysterious structures still standing today in places like Moundsville and Charleston. What were these mounds for? Burial, worship, or something more enigmatic? No one knows for sure. But the Adena vanished, absorbed by the Fort Ancient people, a powerful culture that dominated the region, until their sudden disappearance around 1650, when the Iroquois Confederacy swept through, leaving only silence and ruin behind. By the time European settlers arrived in the 1700s, the land that would become West Virginia had transformed into a ghostly battleground, dotted with abandoned villages, whispered legends, and warpaths carved into the wilderness. This is where the story begins, not just of a state, but of a land shaped by survival, erased civilizations, and unresolved mysteries still buried beneath its soil. Colonial shadows. West Virginia's forgotten origins under Virginia's dominion. Long before the name West Virginia would echo through the mountains, this land existed in the margins, wild, contested, and cloaked in tension. In 1609, the Second Charter of Virginia laid claim to vast western territories, including what would one day become West Virginia. But this was not a land easily taken. By the 1670s, English expeditions pierced the dense wilderness. Governor William Berkeley, eager to expand trade and influence, encouraged exploration. It was in 1671 that an expedition finally reached the New River, flowing westward through the rugged terrain, a river that whispered of uncharted domains. From Peters Falls, at the edge of what would become the West Virginia border, English explorers laid claim to everything the river touched. But ink on a map would mean little in the face of mountains, resistance, and rival empires. This isolated frontier, shielded by the Allegheny Mountains, became a region of contest. Native American nations fiercely defended their lands, while French ambitions clashed with British claims in the Ohio River Valley. Even when Britain emerged victorious in the French and Indian War, gaining control of all lands west of the Appalachians in 1763, peace did not follow. That same year, the British drew a royal proclamation line, creating an Indian reserve and forbidding colonial settlement beyond it. The mountains had become more than a physical barrier. They were now a legal one. Still, the settlers came. They braved isolation, poor roads, and constant threats. And with each passing year, resentment grew. The people west of the Blue Ridge felt abandoned by the wealthy elites ruling from the east. Discontent turned to action. In 1769, a bold vision emerged, a proposed 14th colony named Vandalia, carved from the wilderness. Not long after, whispers of a breakaway state called West Sylvania stirred again. These were more than political dreams. They were cries for identity. The people of the Trans-Allegheny frontier were different. Drawn from varied backgrounds, they shared a common cause: independence from the plantation aristocracy of eastern Virginia. The soil, climate, and terrain made slavery unviable, and their culture made it undesirable. And yet, in Virginia's legislature, the East reigned supreme, controlling representation, taxation, and power. A divide was forming, not just of distance or geography, but of spirit. And in these deep valleys and shadowed hills, that spirit would one day erupt into the birth of a state unlike any other. Forged in war. How the Civil War gave birth to West Virginia. As the storm clouds of the American Civil War gathered, the mountains of western Virginia stirred with a different kind of rebellion, not against the Union, but against their own state. In April 1861, at the Virginia Secession Convention, the divide was clear. While Eastern delegates moved swiftly to break from the Union, most Western representatives stood firmly against secession. The vote passed, but the Western counties refused to accept it quietly. Just 1 month later, in May 1861, a defiant group gathered in Wheeling, challenging the very legitimacy of the decision. They declared Virginia's ordinance of secession not just invalid, but illegal, a direct assault on the Union itself. This wasn't merely political resistance. It was the first flicker of a new state being born. By June, at the Second Wheeling Convention, that flicker turned into a flame. The delegates boldly nullified the Richmond government, declared it void, and formed a restored government of Virginia, loyal to the Union, headquartered in the West. New state officers were elected. The question was no longer whether Western Virginia would resist. It was whether it would become something entirely new. In October 1861, the people voted. Across the proposed counties, and even in 2 neighboring ones, the support was overwhelming. Yes, create a new state. In November, delegates convened to draft a constitution. By April 1862, that constitution was ratified by popular vote. But still they waited. Until, finally, on June 20th, 1863, West Virginia was admitted into the Union, a state born directly from the fires of Civil War. A unique condition of statehood was imposed: the gradual emancipation of slaves. The capital would eventually find its permanent home in Charleston in 1885. Though few large-scale battles were fought on its soil, West Virginia's destiny was shaped by war long before the first shots rang out. In 1859, years before statehood, a radical named John Brown led a raid on the federal armory at Harper's Ferry. Driven by a fierce abolitionist conviction, Brown's attempt to spark a slave uprising failed, and he was captured, tried, and hanged in Charlestown. But his legacy ignited passions across the country, pushing North and South further apart. West Virginia itself was torn. As a borderland, its loyalties were divided. Nearly 32,000 men joined the Union Army, while an estimated 9,000 fought for the Confederacy, though some claim that number may be much higher. Here, neighbors chose opposite sides, and the war echoed in homes as much as it did on battlefields. This was a place not just shaped by war, but created by it, a state carved from conflict, born of dissent, and driven by the enduring belief that loyalty to the Union mattered more than loyalty to Richmond. Ashes and industry. West Virginia's post-war struggles and survival. After the fires of war cooled, West Virginia did not settle into silence. Instead, a new battle began, one not of muskets and cannon, but of machines, minerals, and men. In the 1870s, as railroads carved through the mountains like veins, industries surged to life. Timber, salt, oil, natural gas, and most of all coal, transformed the once isolated region into a powerhouse of American industry. Deep beneath the earth, miners toiled in dangerous shafts, while the outside world grew ever more dependent on what lay below West Virginia's soil. But the cost was steep. Between 1912 and 1921, the coal fields erupted in violent labor conflict. The fight for Union recognition led to deadly clashes, sabotage, and martial law. The National Guard was called in twice. The U.S. Army intervened 4 times. The hills that once echoed with native war cries now heard the gunfire of miners and militia. It wasn't until federal labor protections in 1933 and 1935 that the flames of rebellion cooled and a fragile peace settled in. Still, West Virginians answered the call of duty. During World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, the state ranked among the highest in per capita military service. A people forged in hardship did not hesitate to serve. Then, in 1960, the eyes of the nation turned to West Virginia again, not for war, but for politics. In a surprising Democratic primary victory, John F. Kennedy, a Roman Catholic, won over a predominantly Protestant electorate, proving his national viability. The moment reshaped presidential politics, and West Virginia became a state that could no longer be ignored. Through the late 20th century and into the 21st, West Virginia remained a Democratic stronghold, though its people began leaning Republican in presidential elections, backing George W. Bush in both 2000 and 2004. Yet for all its political shifts, one truth endured: coal remained king. By the early 2000s, West Virginia mined half of all U.S. coal exports, much of it through the controversial practice of mountaintop removal. The state led the nation in underground coal production, but the victories were shadowed by heartbreak. In 2006, the Sago mine exploded, killing 12 miners. 4 years later, 29 men died in the Upper Big Branch mine disaster, a grim reminder that mining still claimed lives even in the modern age. These tragedies became part of the state's living memory, as much a part of its identity as the black seams of coal running through its mountains. West Virginia's story is one of resistance, resilience, and reinvention, a state born of conflict, shaped by industry, and haunted by sacrifice, yet still standing, still pushing forward. If you found this journey through West Virginia's hidden past captivating, don't stop here. Subscribe to History Love for more deep dives into forgotten histories and untold stories across America and the world. Got a historical mystery you want us to unravel next? Drop your suggestion in the comments. This is History Love, where every place has a past, and every past hides secret.